Until this week, Vladimir Putin was known as a symbol of Russian power. That's the image he had created for himself, how we all saw him. The word power described all his actions, whether it was the display of his masculinity, the exercise routines, the shirtless excursions, the judo moves. Statesman Putin showcased his power too. The power walks through the halls of the Kremlin, the signaling of intent through rallies. When he scolded his colleagues, Putin didn't flinch for even a second.
В противном случае мы должны принять то решение, о котором сегодня говорится. Что значит, в противном случае вы предлагаете начать переговорный процесс? Нет, я или признавать суверенитет. А я говорите прямо. Я поддержу предложение о признании. Поддержу или поддерживаю? Говорите прямо, Сергей. Поддерживаю предложение. Так и скажите, да или нет.
That was Putin in February, just before the invasion of Ukraine. He was scolding his spy chief. That's the Vladimir Putin we know. The man who has ruled Russia with an iron fist. But this week at the SCO summit, Putin looked like a completely different man. His demeanor remains the same, but the Russian president doesn't sound confident. For the last 2 days, Putin has found himself repeatedly defending his actions in Ukraine. Yesterday, it was Xi Jinping, and today it was India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. There is a marked shift in the Russian president's tone. He is reassuring allies that the war will end soon. He's answering questions and addressing concerns. Has the war in Ukraine cornered Russia and its powerful leader? This is our cover story tonight on Gravitas. We'll start with the latest, the Putin-Modi bilateral. It happened on the sidelines of the SCO summit. The setting was cordial. Prime Minister Modi walked towards Putin. Both leaders shook hands, but once they sat down to talk, the mood changed. Prime Minister Modi began by thanking Ukraine and Russia for the support during the initial days of the war. And then the Indian Prime Minister said this.
आज का युग युद्ध का है नहीं और हमने फोन पर भी कई बार आपसे इस विषय में बात की है कि डेमोक्रेसी और डिप्लोमेसी और डायलॉग ये सारी बातें ऐसी हैं कि जो दुनिया को एक स्पर्श करती है। आने वाले दिनों में शांति के रास्ते पर हम कैसे बढ़ सके उसके विषय में जरूर आज हमें चर्चा करने का मौका मिलेगा।
Today's era is not an era for war. Diplomacy and dialogue is the way forward. The message from the Indian Prime Minister was unambiguous. He asked Russia for a cessation in hostilities, a peaceful resolution to the conflict in Ukraine. So the question is, how did Putin respond to that? Well, with a word of assurance, a guarantee of sorts, Putin told Prime Minister Modi that Russia will do everything it can to stop the war.
I know your stance on the conflict in Ukraine. I know about the concerns that you voice constantly. We will do everything for it to stop as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the leadership of the opposing side, Ukraine, has stated that they refuse to hold talks and that they want to reach their goals militarily, or as they say, on the battlefield.
It's quite clear Putin was shifting the blame on Ukraine for a bit, but let's focus on his choice of words. We want all of this to end as soon as possible. In April, the Russian president was threatening a lightning offensive in Ukraine. Somehow, Putin no longer sounds that confident anymore. Yesterday, he gave a similar reassurance to his most important ally, China. Yes, the war in Ukraine is testing the no-limits partnership. Yesterday, Vladimir Putin met Xi Jinping. We had told you about this on the show. The meeting happened, of course, on the sidelines of the summit. Many had predicted the Chinese president will reaffirm his support to his Russian counterpart. But a comment from Putin has taken everyone by surprise. It seems like the Chinese leadership is having doubts about the Russians' offensive in Ukraine. Listen in.
We highly value the balanced position of our Chinese friends when it comes to the Ukraine crisis. We understand your questions and concern about this. During today's meeting, we will of course explain our position.
We understand your questions. We understand your concerns. We will of course explain our position. That sounded quite like a reassurance. So why did Putin feel the need to reassure Xi? What is China concerned about? Beijing is avoiding all these questions about this comment. The Chinese press didn't carry Putin's statement at all in its reports. Isn't that curious? That statement was missing from the press releases of the Chinese government altogether. Look at this. This is the official press release about the Xi-Putin bilateral. It comes from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. However, there is no mention of Ukraine, no mention of the No Limits partnership either. So what has changed? Perhaps China doesn't like the fact that the war has dragged on for more than 7 months now. It is a known fact that Beijing has been feeling uneasy about the escalating conflict. Recently, the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang gave his assessment, and he said that China is deeply worried about the crisis in Ukraine. In fact, I have that statement with me right now. Here is what the Chinese Premier said. On Ukraine, indeed, the current situation there is grave, and China is deeply concerned and grieved. The pressing task now is preventing tensions from escalating or even getting out of control. That means Beijing too prefers a diplomatic solution, but after recent events, a diplomatic settlement is out of question. Ukraine has launched a counteroffensive. Kiev says it has retaken some 6,000 square kilometers of territory. The Russian parliament is considering summoning the defense minister. The lawmakers want to quiz him about the setbacks. So there is scrutiny at home, but that shouldn't affect Putin in any way. There is no sign of any major dissent against the offensive in Ukraine. A survey came out last month. More than 80% of the Russians support Putin, but the scrutiny of Russia's war is certainly growing outside. So what does that mean for Vladimir Putin's stature on the international stage? After the SCO summit, the strong man of Russia suddenly looks weakened. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.